Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. So a few words about the company I represent, Landsbankinn. We come from Iceland. We are a financial institution in Iceland. We were first created at the end of the 19th century. Then, as some of you know, something happened in 2008 in Iceland. So we had to recreate the bank. We're currently the leading financial institution in the country, with about 40% market share, and we're still mainly owned 98% by the Icelandic state. A few introduction to the logical data warehouse and data virtualization for those of you who are not familiar with it. It's something that will sit on top of your traditional physical, in a way, data warehouse. You don't have any physical storage in your logical data warehouse. Imagine you can combine your data warehouse with external sources, like a web service, for example, without any form of replication of the data, without ETL, and having your logical data warehouse managing all your joins. Again, without replication, without ETL, and you get the idea. You can add pretty much an infinity of sources. Now, of course, if it only did that, it would be kind of pointless if you weren't able to actually query that data. So it also allows you to query that data through your BI analytics tools like Tableau, Power BI, and such. Data science, machine learning platforms, direct queries for the most motivated of users, or directly by source systems like CRM, for example. The two words, data virtualization and logical data warehouse, they are used interchangeably, although making a logical data warehouse is only one usage of your data virtualization solution. You could use it, for example, as an interface, as a buffer for database migration for one of your source systems. You could use it as a business repository where you remove your entire business logic in there. I will go over that a bit later, etc. So a few words about data virtualization in general at Landsbankinn, Iceland. Our data landscape is traditional, really, nothing out of the ordinary. We have an ETL chain from our source systems to our data warehouse. We have about 700 ETL jobs running, and about, I think, 50 terabytes of data in our data warehouse, if you combine the old data warehouse and the new data warehouse. Then consumed by 3 different reporting platforms, soon 2, because we're getting rid of one of the 2. And about 80% of the corporation uses directly our logical data warehouse. We had some limitations in that landscape, which are common, I guess, for data warehousing. The main ones were, of course, how long it took to add new stuff to our data warehouse, and also to make some improvements to it, because it meant changing one of those 700 jobs, ETL jobs. We also had a very complex security model and business rules. I will go over that in detail a bit later. We were struggling a lot in terms of governance and impact analysis data lineage, because we didn't have any centralized platform for it. So this was our environment before moving to logical data warehouse. I only showed 2 of our reporting platforms here. No, actually, I have the 3. So we had too many query points. We had basically a query point in each of our databases. We had also too many business rules that were scattered all over the place in views directly in our data warehouses and in our source systems. We had business logic in our business object universes. We had business logic in our SAS macros. We had business objects at the end level in reporting. And of course, we had as many points of data security. Every step, every product, every time you add a new product on top of the other, you add a complex security. So we moved that to having a logical data warehouse using Denodo. That will be as a single point of query. Basically, the approach would be, OK, do we need data? We need data. We ask our Denodo platform. All the business logic will be stored there. All this logic from any department will be stored there with governance features available there, like Lineage, for example, and impact analysis. And we also wanted to make it the single point of business security, like, are you allowed to see that data? Are you allowed to see all the rows in that table, et cetera, et cetera? I will go over that in detail a bit later. So if I go back to what I showed you earlier, we had about a huge variety of sources. And in Denodo, you create an abstraction of this source system called a data source. And from this data source, you create base views. Base views are the encapsulation of the wrapper of your physical source table. Then from there, you start building what I call the layer cake of views. You combine your join, you merge your data together, again, without any form of replication and without ETL. And then you expose all those views together without having to wonder about where the data is coming from. And then you publish those views, like I said, you expose them to your reporting systems. You build your final result. So here I have shown 3 views, but of course you can have as many views as you want in that publish layer. So we have a look, and of course everything is framed between the 2 pillars of BI administration, which is governance and management. I will go over that a bit later. So our implementation, we follow the guidelines that Denodo actually publishes, like the diagram you have on the right. We have about 25 different data sources. Right now in our data warehouse, it's still growing. 5 different data source types. Everything is on premises in Landsbankinn because we are tied to some regulations about privacy and et cetera on the country level. The financial supervision authority is blocking us from going to the cloud right now. We have a layer cake of view of about 3,500 views in total, and in our consumption layer we have about 500 views. Timeline of our implementation. 3 years ago, there was a new leader in the IT department in Landsbankinn. So he decided to start modernizing the tools we have in the corporation. So we did a landscape assessment in summer 2016, and which led to us contacting Denodo in April 2017. We built our first proof of concept prototype in the summer, and in September our environments were up and running for the first time. Now, because of these policy changes in Landsbankinn, we actually had to wait, and we only started working in March 2018, and 3-4 months later in June, we had our first version live of the virtual data warehouse, logical data warehouse, with the first semantic layers, first reporting platform moved in September of this year. This year so far in 2019 has been quite exciting. We've kind of advocated for more usage of the platform in the corporation. Like I said, we have about 8% of the corporation right now using Denodo, the logical data warehouse, one form or another. And we'll go on and improving it, of course. A small focus on our security model, like I said, on how people access our data and how we restrict them from accessing the data they only are allowed to use. Of course, this is not the true story. My supervisors weren't really keen on showing a lot of people our security model, so it's inspired by the truth. Before virtualizing, we had 3 different access levels. The first one was, can you connect at all to the data warehouse? It was all managed by SSO through Active Directory. The second level was, can you access all those tables? People in departments, for example, let's say the loans, the mortgages departments, could only see the mortgages data mart. And also, of course, we also have privileges on the data themselves. Can you see what's in your table? In some cases, it was restricted to, for example, people in branches could only see their own branches. So if you put all that together, we actually had a matrix like that, combining 2 different levels of profiles. One of the profiles were on the data. The second profile was on the users. And if you combine all that in the matrix, I think the amount of combinations possible in the old model was about 872 different access profiles. We have 900 employees. There was pretty much one profile for each user. So we had to change that. Because this was the problem we had to address. Imagine a small branch of 4 people extracting the same data, what they thought was the same data, having different results because of their security model. So we had to redesign all that. We started with this statement. The security model was created at first in 2008, more than 10 years ago. Since then, since that time, the usage of the bank has completely changed. The concept of branch has more or less disappeared in a way that, because of how much online banking has developed, the branches are not really relevant in a small country like Iceland. We also had a significant proportion of calls to the IT hotline and then towards the BI team about access-related things, because users don't know how restricted they are to the, didn't know how restricted they are to the data. So we met with pretty much everyone and every team leader in the corporation to redesign all that. So how do we do that now? Well, we still have everything managed by our Active Directory. We have groups that tells you, are you still able to connect to Dinodo at all? But then, instead of limiting what you can see, we'd rather see the same amount of rows, but hide things that would allow you to identify all that. And of course, we have been also building user assistance view. We have a web page where people can see live the user access they have, the access they can request access to, and all that is actually used building views on the Dinodo metadata. And of course, yes, we have some auditing in our platform to be sure that everything is correct and we don't have any unfair usage of our logical data warehouse. So what do we have now? If we go back to our small branch, we have these three columns on the right that are masked to users for querying, but that allows us to define profiles on the data. Here we have some customers, retail and individuals. So our deputy branch manager would see everything because she has a lot of responsibilities. Then the corporate agent who sees the same amount of rows but wouldn't know exactly who would be the individuals because it's not his role. Same thing for the retail banking manager, and same thing for the customer representative. The good thing about this data masking capabilities is that we keep the same amount of rows. So if we ask your team, how many credit cards do we order next month? they would be all able to tell you we have to order 5. A few words about data governance, limited to, in that case, impact analysis and data lineage, because it's so far the only things we have implemented in Dinodo. We had, for the lineage, we had to extract the metadata from our ETL repository. It was an exhausting process, and because it was an exhausting process, it was never up to date. What we have now with Dinodo is that we're able to actually, I'll show you a small screen capture later, we're able to actually view in real time the lineage of our data from the query point from the publish level to our base views, which are the representation of the data source. Impact analysis, the exact same thing, but the other way around. So this is how it looks like in Dinodo. To see the lineage, if you have a question about one column in your system, then you're able to trace it back to the source. Dino comes with a product called the data catalog, which is a data catalog, and a graphical interface, web interface. You're able to also see where the data is coming from and what transformations are applied to this data. Same thing for impact analysis. It comes in the administration tool of Dinodo. This year, like I said, we've expanded our usage of Dinodo, and we started querying the products from unconventional products, let's say. So the problem about that was that we had too many tools. We had a SaaS platform, we had a business objects platform, we're including Tableau now. So all those queries, it was really hard to say, okay, what tool are you using to get data, and then we can help you. It was problematic. Because it was something that was started to be done 12 years ago now, the reliability on some of the stuff was questionable. And of course, because the more tools you have, the lower the user training is. So for example, we had a product manager who wanted to start a marketing campaign and wants to send tote bags to his customers in the last New Year. So he would connect to business objects, for example. He would have to go through 700 reports. Just not finding it, have to call the BI team for assistance, and then he would export it to Excel, copy the column of the email addresses, put them in CRM, and start the marketing campaign. So we changed that. How did we do it? We used the Dinodo data catalog, like I said, for the more technical users. And we also have created web services in the Dinodo platform that are based on our base views, using the REST technology, with all the business logic, again, stored in the view, because Dinodo is our single point of truth. When it's used from Excel, because Excel can connect to web services now, it's only used to display the data in Excel. It's really hard when you work in a bank to convince users to use something else than Excel. And we have some specialists in each department handling those views. So how did we do that? Well, like I said, we have data web services, REST web services, following this logic. Each department, each team has its own REST web services. Encapsulated in this web service, you'll have as many views as you want. And a view is what you actually need for your business, for your everyday job. And of course, we have row level, column level security still in order, like the data masking I mentioned earlier. So why web service instead of something more traditional like an ODBC connection? Less maintenance. ODBC is a lot of maintenance. Same thing, we don't have to update any JDBC driver when we upgrade Denodo. At least it's more generic. And the amount of data we have doesn't justify an actual ODBC data source. So next step, those data web services, we want to move them directly to the source systems. The way we picture it, users would have a menu that is available to them to display directly the data coming from Denodo. And we also want to have experts creating views by themselves from the data catalog in Denodo. Last comment on feeding external data to our data warehouse, because a data warehouse by definition is always hungry. So we use Denodo to actually complement our ETL tool. Right now, our ETL is very small in terms of licensing, so we can't connect to a huge disparity of sources. So it was hard for us to connect to external data, for example, the National Institute of Statistics, or the central bank, who sometimes sends FTP files to us, and etc. So if I take an example, our human resources system is hosted at one of our contractors' platform. So this human resources system comes with a web service. And so we're able to connect to this SOAP web service from Denodo to actually normalize that data, put it in the shape of a view, and then we can store it. We would like to store it somewhere physically in order to keep the history, because this HR system doesn't have history. So we used the remote tables Denodo comes. Remote table is a link between the physical data warehouse and the logical data warehouse in a way that it creates a representation of data you want to actually insert in your logical data warehouse. It's like a bridge between the two. So we build our base views from this web service. Then we have an extraction process that inserts that in our extract layer in the data warehouse with a snapshot key. It's then following an ETL process, very traditional, to create our dimension in our final layer of the physical data warehouse. And then we reconsume those views in Denodo to add them to our logical data warehouse to keep our logical data warehouse as a single point of truth. A few challenges about that project, because I only showed you one usage here in that case, which was the HR web service. In reality, we have about 7 up and running with different technologies. We had to handle the fact that the locale, because we are Icelanders, so we use very weird characters, we had to handle that still in 2019. Also, we had to manage how these insertions would be done in the data warehouse. So we use our corporate scheduler to call the Denodo scheduler API to insert the data, and then all the management on the physical data is handled by Oracle in our data warehouse. That's all for me. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. I will be outside for 5 minutes if you have any questions.